From 1996, the original Quake 1 is one of the most fascinating games ever made. Designed as a shooter, but ending up as a platformer above all. id Software, before they began making Quake, was famous for the Commander Keen series. Doom itself even being originally intended to be a Commander Keen game, though that idea was rejected as it was not seen as unique enough to showcase the capabilities of a 3D engine. With Quake's physics-based movement system and level design, it could properly achieve what they could never achieve in the Doom engine with a platformer. John Romero had 7 level design rules with Doom, but he only had 1 with Quake. Make nothing that could be made in Doom. And this design philosophy creates nearly every piece of level design that makes Quake feel, oh, so fluid. Quake through the years has long forgotten this, which is why Quake 1 will still remain the highest rated title of them all. Quake 2, a marked decrease. And of course it was. It completely missed the point. Quake 2 completely removed any air control from the game, and seeked to simplify the movement. Simplifying the movement of your platformer wasn't such a great idea after all. John Romero had a fundamental design philosophy, making Quake, instead of a conventional shooter, more of a 3D platformer with guns. As he explained, quoting him now, "I had a rule for the designers: if they created a room in Quake and it could be replicated in Doom, they had failed. Every room needed to show the dimensionality of the engine, a mandate which forced designers to exploit the true 3D space through things like vertical shafts, overlapping rooms, and moving platforms. This commitment manifested in a level design which was integrated tightly into the core gameplay. He described platforming sequences where, quote, even on the very first level, you got into a dark room, where you knew you coming down ramps, and there was 100 health up there. The only way to get it was to do some crazy platform hopping. These were little pegs sticking out of the walls, and if you could jump from peg to peg and get all the way up there, you could get the health. Sequences requiring precise timing and movement rather than pure shooting accuracy or strategy. A beautiful example and quote from him, detailing why Quake was such a great game. On screen now, we have one of the original design documents. The quite ironic thing, or quite poetic thing, is that the document in 2D perfectly shows what is not shown. The dimensionality, the spots in between. Quake is more a game of what you don't have than what you do have. All of these early FPS games, made from the dawn of 3D in 1996 to Half-Life in 1998, shared this feature, whether it was Quake, Duke Nukem, or Unreal. They all came from developers who had originally made platformers. Epic made Jill of the Jungle, and then that was transitioned when they made Unreal. Duke Nukem started his life as a platformer, and Quake with Commander Keen. This type of level design and set pieces had the movement skill prioritized over all. Romero described underwater sequences and timed elevator rides that took them underwater, and all of a sudden they started dying. It was perfectly timed for them to come out of the water and pick up health, as they were panicking the whole time. Things that required tight timing even in the mundane, a feature which is all completely lost in modern games. Even modern indie games have not been able to replicate this feeling that Quake had. The community developed increasingly sophisticated movement and jumping puzzles, techniques like the infamous E1 M3 grenade jump becoming legendary challenges that took hours to succeed even for expert players, Romero's rule, ensuring that if a player could see outside, that they should somehow be able to get there. Created a design language and philosophy, allowing players to properly exploit these techniques and use it to their benefit. But there was trouble in paradise. Lead programmer John Carmack had heavy issues against bunny hopping. Carmack's relationship with the movement mechanics was revealed in a 1993 .plan entry. Carmack expressed fundamental opposition to the movement techniques that defined Quake's identity, saying, quote, "Strafe jumping is an exploitable bug. Just because people have practiced hard to allow themselves to take advantage of it does not justify its existence." He further lamented, quote, "Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sigourney Weaver don't get down a hallway by hopping like a rabbit." His vision of the game was one he sought to rigidly implement. And seeking to rigidly implement this, he made multiple attempts to fix the bunny hopping in the engine. But these attempts were futile, though they did have damages. He discovered that every fix he made degraded the core movement experience, and documented, "When I tried fixing the code so that it didn't work, I thought it changed the normal running movement in an unfortunate way. This technical constraint forced him to accept the bugs had long become integral to the game's feel, creating what modern analysis describes as a situation where, quote, every change I do makes this game feel awful. A change which was also attempted to be implemented by Valve. However, Valve seeking to do this, Valve failed, as they do at many things. And the most humorous is in Half-Life 2 when they attempted to apply a reversing thrust to anyone who bunny hopped, creating...
Hello, Dr. Freeman? Come in.
Minor fracture detection.
Advanced bunny hopping, a technique where simply by pressing the S key, you can go at an exponentially increasing speed, allowing players to travel at thousands of miles per hour on Half-Life's small and linear maps. Carmack, as well, eventually relented, quoting that some reasonable messages have convinced me that a single immediate jump after landing may be important to gameplay. I'll experiment with it. An acknowledgement representing how tightly ingrained the movement had become with Quake. But after Quake 1, when the air control was completely scrapped, the movement was long over. Carmack would, for the most part, allow it to exist, though never as it did. And even though he tried to fix it, I put that in quotes, it would not be until years later when fundamental rewrites were made, as it was so deeply ingrained within both their and Epic's own Unreal Engine, that this could not simply be replaced. Although, in the 2010s, through rewrites and years of attempting to fix the bug, the movement technique was all but gone. Now let's talk about the physics that made this great jump philosophy. Many of Quake's mechanics as a platformer emerged from specific technical implementations in the pmove.c file, which contained functions like PM air move, PM ground move, and PM accelerate, creating these movement behaviors. The mechanics, centered around simplistic pieces of code, gave birth to an entire family of movement techniques, ones which we still seek out in FPSs today. The movement system operated around a base speed of 320 units per second, or roughly 480 inches. But the physics implemented allowed players to exceed this through a technique-based movement. A technical analysis revealed turning plus movement equals speed, a fundamental quirk in the engine. This allowed players, through strafing, bunny hopping, and strafe jumping, to achieve speeds of up to 650 units per second. Speeds long past what was originally intended, at 975 inches per second. This is something that we still do not see in this genre to this day, and something which we may never see as the norm again. Quite sad, in fact. But these are the days that we have to live with. The underlying mathematics of Quake's movement system truly revealed something about its movement. An acceleration function tied directly to the mouse as well as the keyboard. When airborne in Quake 1, players could manipulate these vectors, creating acceleration in directions exceeding the intended speed limitations drastically. Technical documentation shows the optimal angle for strafe jumping being heavily velocity dependent. Quote, the optimal angle increases as you speed up, tending towards 90 degrees at infinity, further implementing this skill-based system in a way that games could not dream of, with optimal and minimal angles by less than 0.3 degrees during normal strafe jumping, creating a, quote, very fine line between optimal and zero speed increase. This physics system was originally frame dependent, though through source ports they have long since capped this at 72 ticks per second regardless of FPS, and in Quake 3 it is traditionally played at 125 FPS as the source ports do not do that in that game. Beyond the traditional movement, we must take into account the additional movement in this game. Like every platformer, it has its unique power-ups. Though, I'm not talking about Quake's power-ups. I'm talking about damage-based movement. Quake implemented explosion-based movement through rocket jumping and grenade jumping with a damage to velocity conversion, meaning that, quote, 50 points of damage gives a boost of velocity to 400 pixels per second. This being stated around a 320 pixel tall display, making explosive jumping a viable and repeatable navigation tool, rather than a desperate last retort. This system added many traversal options, which made the levels a joy to play, even being implemented in secrets in Quake 2. Quake and the developers knew what they had, but they did not know what to do with it. They seek to make a realistic FPS game, but instead made a great platformer. And they decided that they would gladly give up a great platformer to make any FPS game, as we learned in Quake 4. Through a technique called power buddy hopping, we see the extreme potential of the movement. A technique which, put simply, requires letting off of the W key when in the air to preserve the movement you have, and then pressing back on it once you get to the ground, allowing top speeds of over even 600 units per second through precise timing and forward taps. This technique required great understanding of Quake's ground friction and very accurate timing, bordering on frame perfect, representing the pinnacle of technical movement mastery, though this would be not learned until years and years later, not becoming common practice until around 2015. Strafe jumping only worked because it exploited the absence of ground friction during airborne movement. A comprehensive explanation noting, when jumping, the player is unaffected by ground friction, and by bunny hopping, you reduce contact with the ground. The difference between this and strafe jumping lying in airborne actions. While bunny hopping focused on maintaining speed through continuous jumping, strafe jumping actively built speed through precise turning and strafe combinations. The community has long since learned and mastered these skills, including a 100-meter dash level, which we now have times down to 9.11 seconds on. Far, far from the original intended movement speed. Though id had lost sight of the plot by Quake 3, the community had not. And within Quake 3 and Quake Live, the community was seeking to regain what they had lost, with CPMA, Challenge Pro Mode Arena, a layer of modifications intending to bring back what was lost in Quake 2. Circle jumping for initial acceleration, strafe jumping, bunny hopping, power bunny hopping, and air control, all of which had been lost when id Software decided that they knew better than their own community, and gutted Quake. A sad day, but even though Quake had CPMA movements seeking to recover what they had lost, they never truly did. In Quake 3, the most popular community game mode is something called Defrag, something which would be brought to Counter-Strike on the same engine through surf maps. Because Quake was never about the fighting. There are games with better gunplay and better guns. There always were, and there always will be. Quake is not a game about guns or violence. Quake is a platformer. First, second, and third. That's the reason that after all these years, Quake 1 is so beloved. Quake does not have better guns than many Quake engine games. Quake does not have better guns than even Doom before it. Quake, purely as a shooter, is not an exceptional game. It's barely even a good game. But Quake as a platformer is unlike anything we ever have or will see.